Oh, actually, I realize I'm first. I got to get ready.
Okay, welcome everybody. So we're going to give it a couple more minutes and we'll start at about 10:33, give or take, on the actual presentation.
Howard, you need a big truck behind you like I got.
Well, bring it over.
I know you got stuff. I know you had stuff you could have put up. I know better. Oh, yeah, see, I knew.
All right, welcome everybody. This is the Harvester Homecoming, Fort Wayne, celebrating the heavy-duty truck capital of the world, presented by Ryan Duvall and his assistant, Howard Pletcher. Mentor. All right, we have a few housekeeping rules. So everybody's going to be muted during the presentation. So if you have any questions, click the Q&A button in your menu ribbon. You can also raise your hand to be unmuted to ask a question. I'll announce your name and unmute you, and you can ask, and then we'll move on from there. So, Howard or Ryan, take it away.
I'll go ahead and get this going. Morning, everyone. So I just want to take a quick minute to, I hope everyone can see that, let everyone know kind of what we're about. Harvester Homecoming was founded last year. Long story short, I work for a newspaper here in Fort Wayne, Indiana, which was once the heavy-duty truck capital of the world. Also home of the International Scout, which you should be able to see a bunch of them up there at the top of your screen, and some doing some work at the proving grounds. So I lived here for almost 22 years, and when I was a kid, didn't grow up here or anywhere in the area, didn't have anybody work the factory, but my dad gave me a Scout when I turned 16, and I got into a lot of trouble with it and had fun with it, and it became a big part of my life. When I moved here, I started seeing Scouts all over the place and not knowing the history. I called my dad and said, "Man, there's a lot of Scouts here." He said, "Yeah, dummy, that's where they were all built." So I started diving into the history a little bit and found out what amazing stuff went on here. 2 years ago, my dad's kind of doing his bucket list, bought me another Scout. I wrote a story in the paper about my connection to Fort Wayne through that truck. And I mentioned in there that I thought it was a shame we didn't celebrate it more here, and then we didn't have a museum here. And that got some folks talking and planning, among them my friend Howard Pletcher here and a lot of other retirees. And in August, we had our first festival, and it was an amazing turnout that blew us out of the water. More than 10,000 people, more than 500 trucks. I still don't know exactly how many people or trucks were there. It was that kind of day. But we're also a nonprofit doing more than that. One of the first things, our goal is a museum down the road, and we're working closely on that. We've got a couple leads, and we're pretty close to possibly working in one of the buildings that the gentleman that worked and ladies that worked for International Harvester worked in, and that would be really amazing. But we've also, we gave some books to the East Allen County schools. We got a bunch of guys out there, and every school there got a copy of the Scout Encyclopedia. And I hope to do the same with Fred Crimson's book eventually. So it's really, for me, it's about educating the youth, because for a long time here in Fort Wayne, people didn't talk about International Harvester, because when the company pulled out, it was, there's definitely almost 3 times: Scout plant closing, big truck closing, and then engineering pulling out back in 2012. So it wasn't something a lot of people thought of fondly, but I think we're to a point now, and I proved it with our festival, that a lot of people are want to celebrate the history that I think is important to celebrate. So when it comes to that history, I don't look to no further than Howard Pletcher, who worked at the plant for 40-ish years, 40 some odd. It's funny how a lot of these gentlemen that worked there, they would retire but keep working on contract. So it's like when you ask them how long they worked there, they got to do a lot of crazy math. But and everyone in the Scout community knows Howard well, in the truck community. So before I turn it over to him, I want to show everyone this. You look at this photo. This is found in an old International Harvester Company newsletter or magazine. IH engineer Howard Pletcher pushes the Fort Wayne Four-Wheel Drive Club's experimental Scout to the limit as it races toward the finish line in the recent Sandorama in Benton Harbor, Michigan. Pletcher topped all other entries in the experimental V8 class and posted 5th fastest overall time. So some of you folks that know Howard may not have known that he was a bad driving truck man racing guy back in the day. And I love showing this picture off because, I just think it's the coolest thing ever. So with that, I will turn it over to Howard to give you a little history on Fort Wayne that he can explain a lot better than I can. Then when we're done with that, I'll come back and we'll talk a little bit about what we got going on this year, hopefully.
Okay. Okay, am I on?
Yes, you are.
Okay.
You're one slide back, though, I think, maybe.
Yeah, one slide of the well-known IH tower is not there, but I think we can start without that. That hid the plant's water tank, but plant was well known by that. The IH first started manufacturing vehicles in Chicago. They built the first 100 auto buggies at the McCormick Works, but quickly moved them to the Akron, Ohio plant, where they built all trucks until the late teens. Akron also built farm equipment and other things, and but by the late teens, it was becoming very inadequate. They could not expand it where it was, and they knew that they could not build enough trucks to meet the demands of 1920. One of the things I read about as they looking at it, housing was so short in Akron that people coming into Akron to work could rent a room for 8 hours at a time. You slept there and then you got out. So they said, we got to get out. They then converted the Springfield Champion Reaper plant to building trucks, the light duty trucks, and began a search around the country for a Midwest for a good site for another plant, eventually settling on Fort Wayne after a lot of input from the Fort Wayne community. They the Chamber of Commerce formed a Fort Wayne Development Corporation. It's been identified as really the first industrial park in the nation at that time. They came up with, in 1920, $1 million for improvements in the area, including building a railroad to serve the plant, lots of street and other developments, and starting housing. And it led to a number of other companies then locating right adjacent to Harvester, like Zollner Piston, Phelps Dodge, Ray Magnet Wire, and the Farnhart Capehart television operation, all right in the same area as a result of this. They then, let's move on. Okay. In 20 to 23, they built the plant. built the first trucks there in December 1923 while it's still under construction. Built their first, I think it was 400 trucks or something in that month. I'm not sure where they found room to do it, but that was the start of it. Whoops. It's not supposed to happen. Let's get out of here and start over.
Also, quickly mention that from what we understand, that the nationwide contest to select Fort Wayne may have been the first of its kind also.
Okay. Oh no, I gotta share it. You gotta find the screen sharing again. How do I get back in?
Down at the bottom, should be a green button.
Well, yeah, I gotta get that screen back up. And now we go.
Here we are.
I got it back, okay, and now
Hey, look, there's
start-
a
Yep. 4F. Well, okay. Anyway, there is the tower that I was talking about. There's our December construction. Another landmark of the feature was the power plant here being constructed. They made their own, steam and electricity to run the plant. Just getting underway here. Shoot. One of the big things noticed around town, they had a steam whistle on the plant that could be heard from all over the south end of town. The original one was off of an ore freighter from the Great Lakes. This one, the last one, was built specifically for him. It sounded like an ore freighter, but it was not. Here's our highly automated assembly line in 1930. As you can see, very, very rudimentary, but that was the state of the art back then. Okay. Another feature in the 20s into the mid 30s, IH built their engines in Fort Wayne until the Indianapolis plant opened in 35. Here they're grinding camshafts and piston grinding. And they had a dynamometer room where they tested them all. Not sure if that's a big micrometer or if he's riveting the frame. I think that's frame riveting is what it's labeled. But that's how they built trucks back then. When they started in 1923, this is typical of the model they built, the 63, 73, 103 trucks, 400 the first month, and 6,000 the first year. This has to be somewhere near the plant, but I can't figure out where it is. It was not IH's only presence in Fort Wayne. They had retail stores, this case, right downtown on Columbia Street before IH was formed, 1899. But soon they replaced that sales outlet with this one. You can see the tower there. It's right adjacent to the plant sales outlet that sold both trucks and farm equipment. And that building is still there, serving as an auto junkyard now, but it is still in operation. Here's an overall view of the plant has to be right after it opened, I'm sure, from the age of the cars in the parking lot. You can see kind of what was there, the power plant there in the background.
Power plant's still there.
still there, but probably not
Yeah.
long for the world because it is deteriorating badly and eventually will have to be torn down. Just another view of the plant area. On the right, the larger building is the forge shop and the heat treat area. That a lot of the buildings still exist. That one is gone because there was apparently no other use for it. In the distant background over the forge shop, you can see another water tank and the engineering building there in the background. There, this is a view of the assembly line in 1956 with the VF-190s coming off the line. And DCO 405s, the so-called Emeryvilles, were also built in Fort Wayne, so probably as many there as what they were noted for from Emeryville, but had a separate line which was actually in the Scout plant where they were built. Here in 65 is a kind of a view of all the products that were built at Fort Wayne, from the Emeryville models, the various, well, the Lodestars were built there then, the COVCOs, a little bit of everything above the pickups and travel alls. And you can see the tower in the background, give an idea of the layout of the plant. One of the things I mentioned was the city built a connecting railroad between the 4 railroads in town, called it the Fort Wayne Union Belt. And each of the railroad could then serve the IH plant. Along with that, IH had their own switcher. This one was at the Chatham plant. IH at Fort Wayne had a couple built from trucks, but they eventually ended up with a small real railroad switcher. Among other things, we've got the Scout plant, which was just across the railroad tracks from the main plant. This plant was built in the early 40s as a machine shop for machining operation for Studebaker, where they machined parts for their aircraft engines, for the B-17 engines they built. Didn't build any airplanes or cars or anything here. You notice still there are very few windows in this building. It was a precision machine shop, totally no windows, air conditioned to maintain temperature and fine tolerances on their products. Eventually, after US Rubber bought it after the war, and then IH, some windows and other things have been added. Back side of the Scout plant, that white door is where most all the 500,000 Scouts in the world rolled out of. And the building beside it, they built seats both for Scouts and other IH trucks in there. And then we get into the Scout plant, the early Scouts coming down the line. And a little more automated in the Scout 2 area. In 1950, engineering had been in the Fort Wayne plant itself, part of the office area, and road test was in there. They built a large engineering center just across the road from the plant, and greatly expanded their engineering operations at that point. A lot more people added and a lot more activities. There's what the drafting rooms looked like in 1935. Engine dynamometer room where they tested engines, and in addition, all components, axles, transmissions, whatever we built was tested here. Another thing we had in the engineering center was a shaker. It put it up on this platform and just shook it till pieces fell off basically, but accumulated a lot of miles in a very short time by doing something like that. The Scout on there. And there's one of the CO 4100 Conco, same thing, body being shaken well. Another of the test cells, I'm not sure what they're testing, but apparently it is the engine running and maybe heat or something like that. Notice the cooling fan going on here. One of the interesting things they did is they had a special little building off to the side for clutch spin testing. They put it in this chamber underground, seal it up, and spin it till it exploded to determine the strength of the clutch. So it didn't explode in the truck. And as years went on, another building was added for emissions testing. Here, part of the late emissions things, you got to capture everything given off by the truck and monitor how much hydrocarbons and other things are emitted. Right after the plant was built in the 20s, a test track was built real near the plant to all kinds of testing. One of the things here is the Belgian block, which simulates the worst street you can envision. They get going over this at 20 miles an hour. All the wheels may be in the air at some point. I wouldn't want to drive it.
You still can if you want.
Another feature of the test track is the twist course, where they would determine the amount of articulation a truck can do. And as you can see, they can get through quite a bit, but not all of them can. But that was the purpose, determine strength and find weak points and all that. In addition to the engineering center, in the 60s, they expanded to another building nearby called the Design Center, just moved part of the engineering operations into there, including the styling and various things. No testing, but all the drawing boards and things like that were in the Design Center. Here is a aerial view of it. You can obviously see the test track. Stands right out. To the left of that, across the railroad tracks, is the main plant, and the Scout plant on to the left of that, kind of across that diagonal line. The engineering is to the top, and in addition, we had a large service parts distribution center and various warehousing, and just shows the extent of our operations. Among the trucks built there, the K and KB series were well known through the 40s. In fact, the Ks were so well known and liked that the Russians copied them right after the war, and then after that they passed the plans on to China, where it was apparently a really important part of their economy. They've erected this monument to it out in front of their auto plant, and they built that, I think, probably into the 70s. They built K lines there, and in fact, they even have a postage stamp showing it coming down the line. Other things, here's one of the World War II semis used on the Burma Road. Smaller truck. Built lots of the M5s, medium-sized 4x4s, and as it says, most of them went to the Lend-Lease program rather than the U.S. services. One thing we did build was the M5, or the half-track series. The M5 is one of them. They were engineered at Fort Wayne, but built at Springfield. Here's one thing few people have seen a five-speed on the tree shift pattern. We used that in the CO Lodestar for a while. Rather troublesome, so it soon went to a floor shift. One of our most famous IH dealers was Smokey Unick, the race car designer and everything else, had a IH dealership in his shop in Daytona Beach. But as everybody knows, in the 80s, it came to an end. This is the last TranStar coming off the line, the B line, after 1,500,000 trucks. And the last CO 9670 on the A line. And that is the end.
I already got a couple questions I'll let you answer.
Okay.
Yeah.
We got one person wants to know, you recall what years the CO 190, VCO 190 cab overs were built in?
They started right around 1960, late 50s. And they ran up until into the late 70s or mid 70s, I think. And interestingly, the COVCO is almost identical to a reel model. In fact, the reels were assembled in Fort Wayne. I knew one guy whose job was to look at the line set ticket and decide what emblems had to go on the trucks.
Also, someone wants to know if International was paid by China for the right to build those K trucks. I know you said they were sort of copied, so I didn't know.
Yeah, we're still waiting for our $10 from them, I think. No.
I think
we might. I suspect we may have provided some tooling to Russia for their copies, but I don't know that either.
That's where a lot of the half tracks ended up, right? That were made by International in Russia.
What's that?
A lot of the half tracks that International built actually ended up in Russia, also, correct?
Yeah, most of the IH half tracks went to the Lend-Lease program. Very few were used by the U.S. military.
They're more rare to find here now.
Yep.
I think you touched on this, but we want to know who produced more Emeryvilles, Indiana or California?
What about Emeryville?
Who made more, us or California?
I can't, of the DCOs, I won't say for sure. I wouldn't doubt it was probably about equal in numbers, but I've never seen production numbers to know which is higher.
And another one here, any info on the Paystar 5000 or Paystar 5050 built in the 70s? You can provide on that.
Well, yes, I mean, they were products of Fort Wayne. We built a lot of them they were built only in Fort Wayne, and I didn't include anything on them in here, but we did build them.
All right.
We have someone who wants to ask a question. Larry, go ahead. Go ahead, Larry. Say we can't hear you, so if you could go ahead and type it in the Q&A section.
Oh,
We're going to move
hello?
on. Oh,
Can you
there
hear
you
me?
are. Yes, we can hear you.
Okay, I'm green at this. I got a question, actually a couple of questions about components. In the 40s, my dad used to drive truck between Chicago and Logansport, and I used to ride with him. And going across US 30, I remember trailer loads of cabs, and I think they were coming out of Quad Cities, a company by McLaughlin. I believe they were the R model cabs. My question is, where were the K model cabs? Did they make the K model cabs?
Don't know that for sure. I don't know. I do not know where the K-model cab came from.
Okay, can you hear me again?
Mhm.
Yep.
Okay. Weren't the frames made up in Milwaukee and came down to Fort Wayne? And how about engines? Were they made in Melrose Park and Indianapolis?
Okay. And all the engines were IH, and until we started using diesel, it was gas engines out of Fort Wayne and then Indianapolis almost exclusively, other than the real heavy duty vendor diesel engines, and eventually Melrose Park for the DT 466 and a few of the others that we did use.
Quickly, just need to remind folks that want to answer questions to unmute their microphones. And a couple people have asked through the chat about the water tower, the famous tower, what its purpose was. And we mentioned it really early in the discussion, but it actually covered a water tank. So that was kind of a fancy way to do that.
Yeah.
And
Now, in the early days, you know, every factory had their own water tank to maintain the water supply they needed before, I think, city supplies got good enough. They finally got torn down in the 60s and 70s. And rather than just a plain tank, they enclosed it in brick.
Was the DC 405 made in Fort Wayne?
Yes, probably, yeah, that was the picture I had. There was a assembly line for them, which was actually in the Scout plant. And because Emeryville couldn't build all that were needed.
And then I'm not sure on this one. Someone asked about what about Conoco or Conco, and I don't know what that's referring to. So.
Oh, that was that CO 4100, you know, kind of a experimental cross between a CO and a conventional. That was built at San Leandro, which followed Emeryville. Was built there, but it didn't last too long, and I don't think it ever was built in Fort Wayne.
Another question: where might I find info on the design history of the Paystar 5050, the heavy duty truck? And I'm guessing Crimson's book's a good place, but the design history might be tough to come by. You might know.
Yeah, about the only thing you'd find there is what pictures Krisman has in his International Trucks book.
Yeah, one of the gentlemen who was a part of that project last year gave us a lot of design photos and some of his artwork. So we were privileged to have that. But as far as solid information, I don't know that we'd have any help for you there.
We have one more, Mr. Delmar or Sarah. Can you unmute yourself and ask your question?
Yes.
Hi, there you are.
I just have a comment. The ones that PIE bought out of California were a lot lesser quality than the ones that were built in Fort Wayne. The ones that had the air conditioner condenser on the roof, the ones in California, first trip out, fell through the roof. And the quality just wasn't there. You know, the ones up in Fort Wayne were a nice truck. So you guys done good.
Don't let the former Emeryville plant people hear you say that.
Yeah, it was a fact.
Yep.
And PIE also bought one that was a cab over single axle. They run out of Oakland. It had an International V8 in it. And I mean, it run just like a gas engine sitting there, but it didn't last too long. I don't know whether it couldn't hold together, but it was about 300 horse.
Yeah, the DC, well, in addition to the DCO, there was the VCO series, which had the IH large V8, the V549 engine in it.
No, this was a diesel.
Oh, the diesel?
Yeah. It was a
Okay,
diesel
well,
engine.
we had the 573 and the V800 went into some of them too.
All right, we have a Dean. You are unmuted. Maybe. There you go. Dean, go ahead. Hey, Dean, we can't hear you. You muted yourself. I'm going to unmute you. All right, well, we're trying to figure Dean out. We had a couple more questions come through Q&A. Can you talk about the Scout having a diesel engine and the history and development of it? Also, as an engineer, did you have anything to do with international subsidiary Pacific Truck and Trailer, Vancouver, British Columbia? Yeah.
Well, easily, no, nothing to do with Pacific. It was totally a separate operation that I don't think Fort Wayne had any input to that at all. Well, the diesel, for a number of years have been looking at diesels. They used some Perkins diesels overseas and older Scouts and like that. And as the need came, they tested several brands of them, eventually settling on the Nissan non-turbo diesel that they started in, 76. And, kind of lacked power. Eventually they got the turbo added, which made it at least drivable. Not too much to say about the development of it because, there's only a few people directly involved in that.
I got a question here about the the Scout diesel, and kind of a little bit of background on it was being sought, and why they quit building the Scout. Someone also heard of a '60s pickup with the diesel, and I know that that the company did a lot of testing with different Perkins and things, and obviously the bigger trucks had agreements with Cummins and Detroit. So maybe you can just touch on a little of that quickly, Howard.
Yes, in the 60s, there was a special equipment order for, I think it was the D301 diesel engine installed in the pickup for, I think, for a large lawn service operation in California. And after they got the engineering done, and it was available as an unadvertised option if somebody wanted to order one. So there were some of them wandering around up until the late 60s. I think that then went away. Let's see, what was there another part to the question?
Well, there were questions about the why, the end of days, so to speak. Why did they stop building the Scout? And then another question about why did Oklahoma open and close as fast as it did? Did that have something to do with the oil crash?
Well, the Scout ended on same thing for the pickup when IH ran out of money. As I heard, a story I heard was in 1980, during the strike, projects were all laid out, ranked according to the return on investment. And the 9600 and the new tractor line were the most offered the best return on investment. And after they funded those, there was no money left to do the 1981 Scout, so it died. It was not a decision nobody wanted to do it. It just couldn't be done to do the emissions and all the things that had to be done to keep it going. And pretty much the similar story on the pickup truck. They were in the early 70s. Keith Mazurek was doing all kinds of things to try to improve the profitability of the line. And finally, at one point, he said, we can do no more with it. We're not going to make money. And if you look at it, when we're building at most 50,000 vehicles a year of a particular design, whereas GM is building that many pickups in 1 year, they got a lot of vehicles they can spread their development costs over.
Yeah, that's what I was going to say. I know the big three, so to speak, had a lot to do with the development of the Blazer and then the Jeep and all that. That it was hard to keep up, and with that kind of, I guess, prowess, so to speak. A couple other questions are somewhat specific. Yeah, and I can answer this one that the Lone Star model truck looks similar to a 1939 truck. And yes, it was intentional, and they actually took a truck and put a diesel motor in it to kind of be the model for that Lone Star. It was purposely built to have that look, and we had the truck that it was kind of the poster child for that plan at our show last year. It's probably the most expensive truck that Navistar has in its collection, because the engineering and cost to put that big motor in that little truck was something else. But that was definitely a concerted effort. Kenny Gray, who actually won our Scout Award last year at our show from the Titmans, who own the Scout factory, he has purchased a 58 VF200 he's trying to remodel with the Orville sleeper. And he just wondered if you had any thoughts or any info to share with him on that generally, Howard.
No, I guess nothing specifically to share. He probably knows as much about them as I do.
One of the first sleepers. One of the first sleepers, wasn't it?
Oh, not really first, I don't think. Well, no, they went back into the K line, and I think they were even D line sleepers, but they were conversions by Orville, in this case, Orville Body Company, and they'd been around for a long time, but not a lot of them.
Someone wants to know about.
I would say we still have Dean up here. Did you want to try again, Dean? If not, we're going to have we have two more people who've raised their hands.
Sure.
Okay. We have Barry here. You are unmuted, Barry. Go ahead.
Howard, all three of you, thank you very much for taking the time out for this. It's very interesting. Howard, what years did you work at the plant? From what?
I worked in product reliability from 67 through 97.
So I was raised in Fort Wayne from 60 to about 2000. And so about everybody you went to school with, every kid, their mom or dad worked at Harvester. So that was pretty interesting. And if they didn't work there, they worked for a sub that's making parts for Harvester.
There were a lot. Of course, GE probably had as many people too. So you had, wasn't quite everybody, but there were a lot, as you can say.
Yeah, exactly. I had a father-in-law that worked at Tokheim. Fort Wayne was a huge industrial place. So it's just kind of interesting to go back and hear about all this. Thank you very much. That's all I got.
Some of the questions we have are pretty general and specific. I'm trying to look to see what ones are best for us to cover. The one question is about photos of plant fire trucks. We had a lot of fire trucks at our show last year. There was a fire station right across from the plant. And I don't know of any of Fort Wayne fire trucks specifically what are left. Howard might know, but you know, I know that there are several from the other plants in International. Howard, do you know of any Fort Wayne specific, other than the Fort Wayne Fire Museum has one?
Not specifically. I mean, I've seen numerous photos of them here and there, but don't know much about what they had in fire trucks.
Our friend Greg Carroll wants to ask you what you consider your biggest accomplishment or memory of working at International Harvester.
Surviving for 30 years.
One person wants to know, were all the engines put in heavy-duty trucks painted IH red, or were they painted at by the engine manufacturers?
I believe they were painted by the manufacturers. There may have been some specifications, but I think the Detroit diesels were their greenish blue, bluish green color. And Cummins, I've heard, I think some were red, but I've heard of others in their tan and like that. So I don't think we specified what they were to be.
Jeff Bade wants to know if there were ever any serious buyers for the light line that you knew of when they went to close it down that might have kept it going.
For the light line, no, I don't, never heard of any moves to sell that. It just disappeared.
And then a more specific one, we'll try to round this up so I can talk a little bit about what we have going on. The K, L, and R models, where were they made? And also, how many other truck manufacturers did International provide cabs for? There was this person had ties to the Comfo cab, and the International one time provided cabs to Diamond T, I think, or it says Diamond Rio and Hendrickson. But what do you know about that part of the?
Yeah, I know that K line and R line and the Comfo cab then were used by many of the, I want to say, smaller manufacturers, and notably Diamond T and Rio, and some of them I've seen lists, and they're probably, in the more minor guys, there's probably a dozen manufacturers that used it. And as previously said, I don't believe we manufactured it. I think we bought it from McLaughlin, or who actually manufactured it, I'm not sure, but it was used by a lot of people.
One person wonders if, and I know that the answer to this, there was different shifts over the years, first trick, second trick, third trick, but what was the kind of shift? Because at one point they went to 12-hour, and can you explain it as far as how the shifts were out at the factories? Plants, I guess I should say.
As far as I know, it was basically 8-hour shifts. I'm not sure how much 3-shift operation there was. And I don't know that they went to 12-hour, except when they were doing 2 shifts with a lot of overtime, may have made it 12, but I don't think we had a formal 12-hour thing like they have in later years.
Because I know in the Scout plant, I thought there were only 2 shifts, but I might be incorrect on that, because I know one started at midnight. I've heard stories about never wanting to have a Scout that was built on a Saturday night shift.
Yeah, I'm not sure. Well, and of course, 12-hour shifts were not as much of a thing in the 70s and 80s as they have become later either. So that's another reason why I don't think we ever had them.
Yeah, also, George Kirkham from up in Canada, who knows a thing or two about International trucks, says he's counted as many as 19 different truck makers using the Comfo Vision cabs. So that goes back to something weird. Let's see.
About 5 more minutes, and then we're going to move to Ryan's presentation, and then all other questions will be at the end of his. Okay.
Yeah. John Glancy, a Super Scout specialist who runs the Nationals over in Ohio, says he believes CBI owners wanted to buy the Scout line at one point, and Jeff Bate chimes in that there is a fire truck on display over there at the Super Scout Specialist Museum that came from the Melrose Park plant. Came from another plant, was at Melrose Park. And like I said, we've got, there's a fire truck up in the Auburn collection from one of the plants, a newer version, a 70s truck. I don't know what year exactly. And, I just found out the other day we got a registration for a 1953 fire truck that trolled at the agriculture plant that was built, I believe, here. So, but with that, I will move on to my little part of the show. First thing I've got is, so we're getting asked a lot about our show and whether we're going to have it, and there's really no easy way for me to answer that with what's going on in the world. We do have some time on our hands, and we are going to take our time to make sure we make an educated decision. I don't have a lot of confidence that I have as much confidence as I can in this point. There's just so much going on in the world and things changing every day. I will say if there's another health setback and the governor's plans here don't go forward, we will probably have to cancel it. But as of now, looking at the end of July, first weekend of August, we're hoping to be able to have a show. We are going to do some things to make it comfortable for everyone as we can, we're going to, we can distance the trucks out. We have a lot more room this year. We had already done some things. If those of you who were at the show last year, the hallways of the conference center were packed with memorabilia. And given we are doing tours of that legendary engineering building, there's a lot of room out there for us to display items without cramming people into little hallways. So we were already looking to try to alleviate some of the congestion there. This is just a little aerial drone shot of the Scout plant. And this year we're also hoping to have Scouts in that plant on display. We should have several. So that will be, a treat to actually, a lot of people got into that plant. We hope to have the door 11 open last year, but in the craziness that we had, some of that stuff didn't get done. So this year we're for sure going to have that on track. So as for what you can expect to see at our show is, I've lost my, hold on. We had an amazing turnout last year, and some of the stuff that we had was breathtaking. We had every kind of truck you can imagine. There's an old dump truck that showed up that I never even got to see. Cab overs, several big trucks, and we were expecting to have a lot of big trucks here this year, but the pandemic threw questions into everything. And of course, we had lots of Scouts, more Scouts than I've ever seen anywhere. And of course, we had a nice reception room for employees like Howard and those folks, where they could spend some time, relax, catch up, have some cake and coffee, and be treated like royalty, like they deserve to be. And it was quite a treat for me, and I wish I could have enjoyed it more to see some of the, there were a lot of tears that fell in that building that day, from what I understand, people that hadn't seen each other. And the way I explain it to people is, if you work at a factory or even an office now, that people that you work with, and them from being in the office with them, but you don't know them outside the office or the building, and you'd run into them at the grocery or something, you'd say hi. Well, after you retire, those people aren't really part of your day-to-day life. Well, fast forward 30 years and you meet them at this show, and it's, that's the guy that you did this with, or he's the one that ran this. And, so that was pretty amazing. You can see how these hallways were congested on the left there, where we had a lot of memorabilia being displayed by former employees, and on the right we had the timelines from the Auburn Museum, which originally hung in the engineering building, and they're going to be hanging on the wall in the engineering building this year where they were originally. So you can walk through that and see those where they belong. This is Mike McCombs, who drove that Endeavor racing truck, the Detroit diesel-powered international cab-designed world record speed holder from the Bonneville Salt Flats. Mike came in from Washington State to stand next to that truck all day, and he loved the show, and we loved having him here. And I have been told, though, that truck's not coming back. That was a hard truck to move at 18 feet. Well, no, how long was it? Like 38? It's a huge truck, bigger than any truck you've ever tried to move. And it was a real chore to get the volunteers. Howard's a volunteer up at the Natmas Museum. And those guys got some vehicles rolling last year that were just to have at our show, including one of the original high wheelers that was in the engineering building. And I'm real grateful that the Auburn Cord Duesenberg Museum and the National Automotive and Truck Museum up there in Auburn have been so receptive to what we're doing. And we had somewhere around 7 to 8 museums last year contributing to
Hey,
our
Ryan,
first show.
we can't see your screen. Well,
You can't see my screen.
But it's a feedback screen, not the PowerPoint.
Hold on. Here we go. That better?
Yes, thank you.
Okay. So now I gotta, hold on, I gotta back up here. I don't know where I left off. Did you see all this?
Nope, nothing
Okay.
after the video.
Oh, all right. So I'll just click it. Here's like some of the cab overs I talked about, the Scouts, and here's some of the employees enjoying the reception room. Here's this is the hallway I was talking about that we're already clearing out. There won't be anything in there this year. And then there's the timelines I talked about. Mr. McCombs. This is the scout gallery that we had set up with some of the neatest, I mean, the greatest scouts in existence. You can see here, there's the SSV from the Auburn Kort-Duesenberg Museum. And right to the left of it, you can see the back of it is the one owned by John Firth, a former employee that is kind of the mysterious body. And he's got the chassis and everything for that. That's one of the only known, that, you know, of the three that are left, people know of, that's one of them that was kind of a mystery and had never been publicly displayed until our show, which was a real treat for me. I got really emotional when he texted me and said he was bringing it. It was neat to see that and have it parked next to the real one. And then, of course, this is Phil Coonrod's FC 501, and that's the first, what's left of the first scout to go down the assembly line in Fort Wayne. We are working on getting it as a rolling chassis this year, and we're trying to start a restoration project of sorts on it so it can look like a truck again, you know, someday in the future. But just having that part of the truck there, again, another thing that hadn't really been displayed at a show anywhere, was amazing to me. And it was funny to watch people walk through and wonder what this big pile of rust was doing with all these beautiful trucks. But then you looked at it and you realized that was probably the most important truck in that whole building. So that was real special. And here was a rolling chassis that we had on display with an engine. You can see that this photo is one of my favorites because this shows what I hoped our show would be about. You've got a guy there who possibly worked for the company, knows a thing or two, and he could have a grandson or a relative or just a young man there, and he's talking to him about, this is what this truck was about, and this is what it just really, that's what what we're doing is about, keeping these memories alive and teaching the next generation about it. And again, you can see the two SSVs in the background there. We made a lot of connections at that first show that I wasn't there to enjoy, and you've got Nick Rayer on the right and his Comanche Scout, beautiful, beautiful truck. The gentleman standing next to him, who he said wandered up to him at the show and was talking to him, and he asked the guy, "Hey, what do you want to know about my truck?" And he goes, "Well, I don't need to know anything. I'm the one that drew it out." That's Dick Hatch, International Harvester designer, head of the design department. He basically drew out the design for this truck on paper before it ever went to production. And Nick got to meet him, and they got to spend some time together. And it's those kind of connections that the folks that brought trucks to our show made over and over again. People would walk up and say, "Hey, this is what I used to put on your truck. I'd put the bumper on. Let me show you something. This is how I did it." And it was nice for me to hear how much the guys that brought vehicles and ladies that brought vehicles got to hear from the people that built them. And it's a rare opportunity that you don't see often in the car and truck show world. And we had Navistar came through and got some vehicles to us. Besides that pickup truck, they brought an MRAP for us to have on display. And Navistar Defense will have some vehicles at our show this year if we're able to do it, even more. And this was one of my highlight moments. After the show was over last year, I got to put my daughter next to me, and I drove that around the test track, the proving grounds, which is pretty darn neat. Here's another one of the special vehicles that was at the show. Canada Dry Ginger Ale gave this away in the 79, or I'm not sure what year, I think 79. They had a contest where you could win a Scout. And that's they only made 11, something like that. I'm not sure the exact number. And here, this shows you more of the connections. The gentleman there in the maroon shirt, Bob Arney, was part of the SSV concept, I guess, engineering team. So he's standing there next to those SSVs, sharing with people his knowledge of that, project that never came to fruition. And you see on the hood there is a clay model of the SSV sitting on the mysterious SSV body. So there was, the folks like Howard and Bob and these people who came in and embraced what we were doing and made our show really special. It was pretty breathtaking. Jim Allen, who John Glancy, who was a part of this, they are the co-authors of the International Scout Encyclopedia. he lent his hand to us and helped get a lot of these trucks and helped convince the community that this could be something really special. And he did a presentation in that gallery on the Scout, and yeah, I couldn't have asked for, you know, everyone that took part in it, from John Glancy to Jim Allen to all the employees, to Nelson Lemon Device Gear, who was on board with me from day one, to just everyone. It was amazing, and I really hope it keeps up this way. And here's some of those high wheelers. You can talk about George Mitchell has one of his two high wheelers are in here. He was on before we even announced the show. He wanted to be a part of it. So there were trucks of every kind. I mean, you just can't imagine. You think, oh, I don't know if I want to go see a lot of old Scouts and pickup trucks. It's about history, and there was, you know, everything someone could want. I mean, it was amazing. And you can see that's the yard where we put a lot of the trucks outside the Scout plant. And this was late in the day when a lot of them were gone, but you know, we had quite a full field that day. And, you know, like I said, Scout after Scout after Scout. It made sense that a lot of them came out of the woodwork the day of the show. You know, we more than doubled our registry. The number of trucks we had registered was more than doubled the day of the show. And a lot of those were just Scouts guys here or had in the garage that, you know, oh, well, let's see what kind of day it is. Oh, it's beautiful. Let's go to the show. And again, you can see more and more of them. And we mixed, you know, having them mixed up with the big trucks, you get, you know, a lot of people made connections and you may not make other places. And it's just really neat. Now, here is just a couple samplings of the engineering building that we're going to let you do walkthrough tours if our show is able to go forward like we hope. These are two photos here. On the left, you see the dynos. That's the hot room. That's where they would wheel trucks in and drive them and blow hot air in the front grill to test how they could run under hot pressure. And over here is just some of the kind of aged, patinaed history that you'll be able to enjoy when you come walk through that building. I didn't show you much here today. There's a lot to see. And I always tell people this is where I've been spending a lot of my time lately, worried about this show. I might as well set up office in the stress lab, because there's no way of knowing what the future holds with this pandemic. But we're hoping for the best. And you know, if we can't do the show, we'll refund everyone's money and gear up and try again. But you know, we're going to do our best to make it happen. And I hope everyone. You know, I understand folks that don't want to be a part of it or are uneasy. And, you know, I want feedback from everyone as to, you know, their faith or lack of faith in what we're doing. I just want to make the right decision for us and for everyone else. But we are, you know, paying a lot of attention to the situation and not just flying wildly into this. So I thank everyone that took part in this. And I don't know if we have time for some more questions, but I'd be more than happy to talk to anyone.
Okay. Well, we have two unanswered questions from earlier. The rear fenders for the 1954 pickup bed also fit what other years?
Probably the ones through the 50s, but I don't know that for a fact because I've never had them apart. But they look very similar anyway.
And I think we already addressed John Glancy's, but the CVI owners wanted to buy the Scout line?
Yeah, well, you know, he knows that. And of course, the question was about the pickup, which there was nobody trying to buy that.
Okay, and we have 4 people who've raised their hands. So Tom, I'm going to allow you to talk, and you are unmuted.
Alrighty. Earlier you said something about we had an affiliation with Pacific Trucks, and I was wondering if you could elaborate a bit more on that. Or were they part owners of Pacific, or any? You don't
Well, and I don't have the specifics, but in the 70s, I think I would say owned a majority stock of the Pacific Truck Company, and then sold it as troubles approached in the 80s. But It was more of an owned subsidiary. It wasn't a integrated part of IH.
All right, thank you.
Larry? Oh, sorry. Go ahead, Larry. Larry Fitch? Okay, I'm going to allow Greg to talk. Greg, you are unmuted. Greg, quit touching your mute button.
Greg's still muted.
Yes, I know. Every time I try and unmute him, it's not working. So Greg, you're going to have to hit unmute on your screen. I'm assuming that's where that is. You have yourself muted and I cannot unmute you. While Greg is working on that, I'm going to promote Barry here. Barry, go ahead.
Yep. I didn't hear any talk about school bus chassis. Were they ever built in Fort Wayne?
Probably in the, when the Lodestar was there, I would guess they were. I did not observe any because it was before my time really, but I would have to assume they were built there until they moved Lodestars to Springfield.
Okay, thanks.
A question here about, with respect to the past employees, I'm curious how are customized IHs received at the show? Understand modifying isn't for anyone, just curious. And as the director of the show and kind of the guy that got this ball rolling, I mean, Jerry and I go back and forth. Even some of the trucks we had on display, they were a little more modernized. You know, like, oh, it's not a Scout. That's a, you know, if it keeps these trucks alive, you do what you want to the truck. I mean, you know, every truck that you have these days has to. I mean, where do you draw the line? You know, you don't have an original light bulb or something, but I'm all for anybody as long as it keeps the name Scout alive and keeps this history alive. You know, I'd love to have customers. We had plenty of them there, and I welcome them all. You know, but I will say that, you know, if a truck is nice and original, to take a truck that someone else might want to have and value and love as it is, and then to completely tear it apart and remodel it something else. There's a lot of Scouts laying in fields still, or in barns that, you know, it could be, you know, when I see a truck that's 75% new fabrication, I would rather see them save something out of a junkyard than take a truck that's drivable and do it. But I don't hold grudges against anyone for what they do to their truck. I wouldn't want someone going over my truck with a fine tooth comb and telling me what's original and what's not. And as long as the history stays alive, I'm great with anything you want to do to your truck. It's your truck after all. So. Any more hands for us?
We do. Let's see. Mark Schroyer. You are unmuted. Maybe. There you go. Go ahead, Mark.
Yeah, can you hear me?
Yep.
Sure can.
Hey, Ryan, hi, and Howard there. Good talk with you there. I was at this show last year there in Fort Wayne, and I tell you, it was everything that they explained it as there, what Ryan described it as. And if anybody gets an opportunity to go to it, it is very worthwhile going to. I really went. John Dahl went with me, and I tell you, we walked around there for hours looking at everything, and really, really had a good time. Thanks, guys.
You're welcome. I'm glad you had a good time. I'm glad everybody did.
That's all
funny
I
that-
had. Thank you very much.
Thank you. We were really fortunate because, you know, as a person that kind of ran the things there, the numbers blew us out of the water. And I know we dropped the ball on a lot of things, but I didn't have one person tell me they were upset about being at that show. So.
Say, Dale, I've promoted you. What did you have to say?
Thank you, Ryan. I encourage you to give consideration to your show. I feel your pain as a member of our executive committee and decisions we had to make. It's not an easy one to make. I did spend several years in Fort Wayne working for IH Navistar at the design center, at the materials management center, at the main plant, that type of thing. So it was nice to see all the old photos and that type of thing. And I just really encourage you to keep your momentum up. If you can't make the show this year, we certainly all understand the dynamics of it, but look forward to future years. So really good luck and best wishes to you.
Thank you very much, Dale. And that kind of what I've been telling people involved in the show is one thing I don't want to do is, you know, when people ask me, why did you do this? And it's the folks like Howard and Dale, the people that work there and made these trucks. That's why I started this whole nonprofit and everything. And if I can't have a show that they can enjoy, or if the world's not in a place that's safe for those people to enjoy, we probably won't be able to have a show. I also, you know, I don't want to do a show I'm not proud of. So a lot of things are going to have to come together in the next couple of weeks to make sure this is going to happen, and we can't have a setback, but we're watching everything and keeping our fingers crossed and hoping for the best.
All right, we have another question in the Q&A from Shane. I've always been fascinated with the volume of outside sourcing that happens when manufacturing vehicles of all types. Could we please discuss the sourcing of wheels and tires for international?
Well, yeah, that's one thing we didn't build. I mean, basically, tires, I know, came from all the major manufacturers, it would appear. Wheels, well, again, I mean, Dayton wheels were real popular on the big trucks. Not sure who made the ones on the smaller, you know, the light line and things like that for sure, but it was, you know, we bought what was available on the market, I guess I'd say, for that.
It's funny that, you know, when we put together that scout gallery working with Jim Allen, he's very much a purist. And I remember him, we'd look at trucks and decide which ones, well, it doesn't have the original wheels on it. You know, now I think of what Howard's saying, that there wasn't really there were original wheels for the trucks, but, you know, like I said, there are things that there was no rhyme nor reason to, no concerted, you know, it's what they could get and what worked and what they could get for the best deal. So it's kind of funny how that, you know, the purist side of it thinks of it being a larger concerted effort, when sometimes it's just, you know, dollars and cents and availability.
Okay, we have two hands raised, but I've tried to unmute both Greg Wernish and Larry Sitch now twice. If you could type your questions or comment in the Q&A, that would be most helpful. If anybody else has any questions or comments, now is the time. We have about 10 more minutes. Right, we have a comment from John Pina. Thank you for keeping us updated, Ryan. If all things go well, I'd like to put together a road trip from the Texas area to the show in July. Please feel free to message him if you're interested. So Ryan, there's his contact information.
Well, John, I would encourage you to, you know, get in contact with me on Facebook. And that's one thing I'll tell all of you. If you want to see kind of a lot of what we've done and what's going on, the best place to do it is our Facebook page. Just go, it's a public page. You should be able to see it, you know, very easily. Harvesterhomecoming.com is our website. It's more of a landing point to get your truck registered. It's just, we do a lot of our live updates and information on Facebook and Instagram, but Facebook is the real home for everything that you want to know that happened last year is happening and is going on, including like this presentation was on there. So that's what I would advise people to do. But John, I think I saw your comment on a post yesterday, and you know, feel free to reach out to me. The phone numbers that are on the flyers and all the anything on the website will go right to my cell phone. I'll be glad to talk to anybody that has questions, concerns, or wants just to know basics.
Right. John Vanetta, go ahead.
Yeah, can you hear me?
Barely.
Yeah, let me sit closer to the microphone.
There we go.
I just wanted to comment quickly on your discussion about having modified vehicles at your show. You certainly see this in the antique car business, probably a little bit more advanced than it is in the truck business. But the younger folks who don't have a direct connection with these vehicles in their original state don't see them the same way we do. And you combine that with the ability to drive them in today's traffic conditions and keep them safe and have fun with them. And they appreciate them for maybe some other reason because they look neat or do something or other, but it brings in a younger group of people into what we do. So I think for that reason, it's valuable. The rest of us as purists may or may not appreciate these vehicles the same way they do when we walk by them, but that's fine. Look at the ones you like. But if we want to keep this thing going and get younger people involved in it, I think we do need to embrace the concept. That's all.
Yeah, absolutely, John. And I should have found photos of them, but we had right in front of the conference center last year, 2 really neat lowrider cut down Lodestar trucks. One of them made by a gentleman here in town who does some great work. And we also had a lowrider Scout, really cut down. And I wanted those prominently displayed for that very reason. My kids don't want an old Scout. They like mine, they think it's cool, but they'd much rather have something, more modern. And I wanted those trucks to be out there where the kids can see them, because if they see that cut down Chris Ingalls Scout, the blue, it's beautiful, blue and black, they're like, wow, look at this. And it makes them appreciate the entire brand. And those Lodestars, I mean, what kid's going to get excited about an old grain truck these days? Well, cut it down, make it cool, put lights on it that dazzle, and they get interested. So yes, that's a very important part of us going forward and what we're trying to do with educating the youth, because that's what will, because if you get a kid interested in that truck, the more he gets in the community and gets involved with the international, eventually he may want an original truck. Yeah, absolutely. I couldn't have said it better, John. That's one important reason to be welcoming to everyone.
Yeah, absolutely. The smaller trucks are the lead in to the bigger truck thing, which is what ATHS is about, more so than the smaller ones, obviously. So it starts with that. And of course, the Scouts and Broncos and things are hot right now. So it's attracting that younger crowd of people. So it's a segment that we don't normally attract. Let's work on this and get them involved and welcome them to the things that we're doing. That's all I have to say.
Absolutely.
All right, we have 2 questions in the chat from Brian. If the unfortunate should happen and there's no show, will there still be posters issued or other show memorabilia, Ryan?
We have plans for another commemorative poster. If we don't have a show, I don't see it coming out this year. There's not really, the poster won't, same thing with shirts, because as a nonprofit, we're not going to sink a lot of our money that we're hoping for the museum into items for a show that's not going to happen. We will have some things we're working on, a membership type situation that will have some items available. So there's always, we will have some things available if there is no show this year, but most of the big things like shirts and posters to commemorate it would wait until we actually had a show, because the posters are sort of the postcard for each show, and if you don't have a show, you shouldn't commemorate.
All right, we need to start wrapping this up. We have about 2 minutes left. Ryan, can you go ahead and catch the quote? There we go. Sorry, I had an internet unstable. Did International ever manufacture their own axles, and were there any special application trucks made at Fort Wayne?
Yes, up until particularly until the 60s, IH made all their own axles, I believe, or just about all, and then gradually started, getting Dana in for the Scout, things like that. We made all of them. Eventually, became more of a assembler rather than a manufacturer of everything. And yes, IH made a lot of special application trucks. To list them all would be harder than listing all the manufacturers that used our cab, because there were a multitude of oil field trucks and other things that came from Fort Wayne, and San Leandro made even more of those. That was kind of a specialty for them, was special trucks.
Dig through our Facebook page. There's a photo of a giant truck built to go to Cape Canaveral to help a rocket launch. That was just unbelievable. I had to take power lines down in telephone lines down in Fort Wayne to get it to drive out of town. So there were some of the stuff. Part of the thing that's neat for me as someone that didn't, never worked there and stuff, seeing some of the, guys like, Howard and those people that developed the things they did, at the time they were just doing a job, but man, now they're like rock stars. You look at what they did. Some of that stuff just amazes me. The history is just unbelievable.
All right. Sorry, we can't take any more questions. We actually have another presentation right about now to start. So if you want to join us there, we'll be happy to have you. But thank you, Ryan. Thank you, Howard, for your time and your commitment to this.
Thank you, everyone. Appreciate it.
Have a good afternoon, everybody.
Thanks.